things are going to start rolling out here in a little bit. But I was talking off the top about the great job that your colleague Frank Saravalli did with some of the trade targets that are going on right now. In terms of, I mean, I guess let's start with Toronto, because I know obviously we like talking a lot of Leafs on here. There's been a few rumblings in terms of, some movement, who they're going to move. I've heard some names, thrown out there as far as assets. Like, there's some people feeling like maybe now is the time to trade Easton Cowan if you've got, you can get something in return here, because there is sort of a thought that maybe the Leafs should go all in this year with this group that they have. What's the sense around Toronto right now as far as some of their needs and what they could be doing at the deadline?
I know there's a lot of people that are attached to Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton, but when you're looking at this team, like, I don't think there's a single prospect that shouldn't be untouchable. And because you look at them all, they're all replaceable in some aspect. When it comes to what this team should do is, this is a very important trade deadline for this team, because Mitch Marner is set to be a free agent. John Tavares is set to be a free agent. Like, there's a very good chance this core could look a lot different next year. And I know that's what a lot of fans have been saying for a long time, but it was never realistic they were going to blow up that core, because in the end, even if those guys weren't the ones performing, neither was any of their depth, neither was their goaltending. Their blue line wasn't good enough. So there was a lot of things, and not just, their best guys weren't scoring. When it comes to this team, what they could use, like, they can go out there and get some more middle six depth, getting someone like a Brandon Tanev, who's not having a great year, but could still be a nice boost. Plus, they have Chris Tanev. The Yanni Gord's another one who's a really good two-way player, a guy that a lot of scouts want younger players to be like, those the hardworking, like, always trying to get the puck type players. Like, those are guys that are important in the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning know that. I don't think we're going to see them go out and make a huge splash on defense, but if they can't get one of those decent middle six guys, maybe they get a Rasmus Ristolainen out of Philadelphia. Maybe they go and get Scott Laughton and get a guy who could be a second or a third line center for that team, also from Philadelphia. And a lot of people point out, myself included, that he's from Oakville, Ontario, which is where I'm from, and that's just about a 35-minute drive from Toronto. So that's a guy that would probably like playing in the city. So there's a couple of options here. I don't think they're going to stand pat, but we've seen the last couple of years, they go out there and try to get the veteran presence to go and get guys who can go and shore out that depth. We'll see if they can kind of take that up another level here, but it's kind of a weird market. It's a lot of talk, but not a lot of substance. It feels like you're hearing all these names, but not a lot being linked realistically to teams. And I do wonder if this might actually be a very quiet trade deadline.
Well, yeah, and then there's cap space involved too. There's lots of stuff that are sort of at play right now with certain teams in terms of dealing with the cap and everything else. So I'll be curious to see, a name that I've heard kind of float around a little bit. And there was I was listening to Thomas Drance on the PDO podcast the other day, and he had like this interesting three-way trade between Seattle, Toronto, and Chicago, where basically Connor Murphy and Brandon Tanev would go to the Leafs with retained salary on Connor Murphy. Brandon Tanev obviously being reunited with his brother. Do you think Tanev would be a good fit there? Like, I do wonder, he does sort of provide, a little bit more than just your scoring. Obviously, there's that physical element as well. And then, obviously the storyline with his brother here. Do you think that's something that the Leafs would be interested in? Because I think they're kind of looking for role players too, right?
Yeah, like, this is a guy who's not going to be a big-time goal scorer, but he's an energy guy that's really good at it. He's got that experience of playing in higher roles there. I also thought he looked pretty good last year. It wasn't for the whole tournament, but he played a bit with John Tavares at the World Championship. And hey, maybe they can kind of see what they could do there. So it's a player that has never been a big-time producer. Like, we're talking about a couple of years ago, like, 30 points was good, but he does have the ability to score. He can go out there and battle. He can be a good middle six guy. So that would be an interesting one to bring in. You'd have to probably look at it, where does that perfectly fit there, because the Leafs do have a lot of their middle six, bottom six guys to choose from there. But I do think he would be a legitimate fit, and getting a chance to play with his brother on a team that's got a real shot at winning the Stanley Cup. Like, you look at where he's been throughout most of his career, and he hasn't really had a good chance to win the cup. This would be the best shot he's possibly had. I know I'm saying that as a team, talking about a team that's won one playoff series since I've followed hockey, but
yes, yeah.
At the same time, it's like, I do think there would be a good fit there, and I don't think it would cost a lot because he's not producing.
Yeah, and I'm of the belief too. I think the Leafs do kind of need to go all in, depending on what's happening with some of these UFAs. With Tavares, with Marner as well, and again, they got the good goaltending this year. That's the thing. Like, you've got capable goaltending that I think is a little bit more trustworthy than maybe some of the people they've had between the pipes in the past. So I'm curious to see what the Leafs does. And again, this is, I would also argue this, and you let me know because you're the Toronto guy. Like, I don't even think Austin Matthews is playing his best hockey. I still think there's some things he's dealing with just from the outside looking in. You even saw him at the Four Nations conversations like this is a guy that I think is not even playing up to his potential, and they're still winning. So I think there's even a potential of him getting into another gear. What do you think about that, and maybe factoring that in as well with the deadline, maybe not going too crazy either?
Yeah, like that's the thing about Matthews. Like, if I wouldn't be surprised if they get knocked out of the playoffs early, and the whole story is that Matthews was playing the whole season with an injury. Because you're right, like we know we've seen this before with Austin Matthews. There's been those years where he goes out and leads the league in scoring, and the next year not even close. And that's one of these years now. It doesn't look like he's shooting with the same confidence or the same power that we're used to. So you saw him at the Four Nations. He was passing the puck a lot more, and for a guy who's out there trying to score goals all the time, it did not look like the Austin Matthews that we're used to seeing. So I think with him, it's that's the thing. You don't want to keep making excuses for a core that continues to find creative ways to lose, but it's very clear Matthews has not been playing at 100% health this year. Now the other guys, Tavares, Nylander, Marner, they've looked really good. Morgan Riley has not on the point, but you need Matthews to go out there and be good. Like, I wonder if this is something where this has been a conversation the last couple of years, is do you save him at the end of the year? Okay, he's not going for 70 goals this year. He's not trying to set like a modern day scoring record.
Not as much pressure to be out there. And all that.
So it's like if they get to the point where near the end of the season, they're like, let's just give you a rest. Let's say they still have Nick Robertson, give him a chance to play higher in the lineup, or one of these other younger guys and see what they could do, a Fraser Minton type thing. Like that, to me, I've always been on the board of like, we see these situations of players taking steps back from hockey, just, rest, get some opportunity to go out there and get ready. I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I've been saying that for the whole season of Elias Pettersson. Like, give him 2 weeks to just.
We'll talk about him later. About him later for sure, because I got some thoughts on that too.
But it's like for Matthews, it's like at a point where you might not like. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be a high seed. They're probably not going to fall in the standings at this point. Like, give them some time to just heal up.
Yeah, I'm totally with that, especially in where they are in the Eastern Conference. Like you're comfortably, I mean, nothing's comfortable, but they're about as comfortable as you can get in the Eastern Conference in terms of points and how they're performing, how they're playing. They have players too. Like this is one thing with the Leafs too. They've got depth where guys can step up and perform well if you have a Matthews sitting out for a little bit. So I think that would be a good strategy. Okay, last time I was on this show, I was asking about Mitch Marner. Things have obviously changed since then with the Four Nations. I mean, he was really a big part of that team, and I would argue that his value has gone up even more because what's the one knock on him? He can't perform in sort of the playoffs, and I would argue that the Four Nations was kind of like that playoff type atmosphere. I think that in some ways took away that narrative a little bit. What are you hearing on Marner? Because this is the big thing, obviously, and we talked about it last time. Brad Treliving already went through this with Johnny Gaudreau in Calgary. I can't imagine they're going to keep Mitch Marner as a UFA come playoff time. Is there any close? Does he feel confident the deal is going to get done, or what's your sense with Mitch Marner and the Leafs?
It doesn't seem like there's been at least a lot of true movement to making that happen. Like, I don't think we should expect a contract in the near future. There hasn't been a ton of talk about it, so we'll see. That doesn't mean it's a problem for, like, not necessarily. Like, if I'm a Toronto sports fan, I'm a lot more concerned about, Vladdy Guerrero not coming back.
Right. Yes, of course. Yeah. That's way worse. Yeah.
That's what I'd be more concerned about than Mitch Marner leaving. Not because I don't think Marner's good. He's having a career year this year and he is a great two-way player. But it's just like, I feel like it's going to happen. We've been through this already with Matthews and Nylander. Like, we know, like, eventually this is going to work out. It is a different GM this time in Brad Treliving, but I do think that this is a situation where I think he wants to be here. He's really good friends with the core guys here. Like, he wants to win. I don't think this is a team that is going to be doomed forever. I think eventually they are going to figure it out. And this is the year that I personally feel the most confident. And part of the reason is you look at the goaltending. Like, when Samsonov, who was shaky, was hurt, then you're throwing in a rookie Joseph Woll to see what he could do. And then the year before that, it was Samsonov and Matt Murray, and then Murray got hurt, and then Woll was back there. Like, now you got a situation where Woll's playing well, Stolarz is playing well. You've also seen Matt Murray come in and win games. You've seen Dennis Hill. Well, Dennis Hill he's played terrible, but like we've seen, the Leafs actually have a goaltending pipeline that they just haven't had. So there's less concern there. It's, again, just making the team I wouldn't say tougher to play against, but more dynamic. Having those options to go out there and be these two-way players who can go get some scoring will make them more dangerous. And eventually, I think things will work out for the Leafs. But I don't think they're going to work out if they move on from Mitch Marner. And I think it's just because no one brings that two-way play. And I will say about his Four Nations tournament, gets that game-winning goal in the first game in what was a really rough game for him. I thought he played really well in that final game. That was good. He had a couple quiet games in between. But when they needed him most, he showed up. That's not for nothing. Now, granted, playing with Sidney Crosby in one game, playing with Connor McDavid in another game, that's, okay. But he knows how to play with good players. He's been playing with Austin Matthews his whole career. So we'll see what happens.